The British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam. Now, I'm Julie. I'm a marketing coordinator for the School of Health Sciences. Before we go any further, I wanted to just conduct a little poll to find out a little bit more about who's here with us. So today I'm gonna introduce you to a few people that are here. We did our polling already. We have a presentation. We have a segment about how to get into the program and some program advising tips, and then a Q&A with an actual advisor. So I just wanted to start by introducing Denise, our program head. Denise, take over whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Denise Pelzer. I'm the program head for the medical radiography program. We're just going to run one more poll just to find out if you know or what you know about medical radiography. And so this is the poll. So can we take X-rays, X-ray images outside of the imaging department? Does a patient have to come to us or can we go to them? And oh, it's almost a 50-50 split. So just so that you know, we can actually go out of the department to take X-rays. So we can go to a patient ward or we can go to the emergency department. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, but we do have mobile equipment where we can go to the patient if the patient can't come to us. I think Julie's just going to run a little video now, just that was taken in one of the Lower Mainland hospitals with one of our grads, just to talk a little bit about what it is that a medical radiographer does.
What I love about medical radiation is the variety. It is different every day, and that's what makes it so exciting.
And we'll go from there, okay? All right.
As a medical radiation technologist, we use general X-ray machines. We use a fluoroscopy unit, CT, and mammography. The most rewarding thing about this job is when patients tell you how much they appreciate what you've done. That's why I love my job.
Okay, so if we're going to do in the medical radiography program at BCIT is a 2-year diploma program. You do a term of academics where we teach you the theory of the positioning and the anatomy, we teach you the physics and the equipment, and then the next term you go out to clinical and practice everything that we've taught you. The students practice on equipment at BCIT that they will be able to find at most clinical sites. And the integration of VR is completely unique to BCIT. It helps the students learn the orientation of the anatomy and how it relates to the type of positions that we try and put our patients into. Once our students graduate from our program, they are fully prepared to write the National Certification Exam, the CAMRT, which allows them to work across Canada. The reason I love this profession is because of the changing technology and the time that I am able to spend with patients one-on-one, communicating with them and getting to know them. This is a really rewarding profession.
Thanks, Julie. So a lot of the information that was mentioned in the video, I'm just going to be mentioning again and hopefully a little bit more detail. So what does a medical radiography technologist do? And instead of saying that, I'm actually going to call ourselves an MRT. It's just a little bit easier and shorter. So we're trained to use specialized equipment to produce radiograph of anatomical images or anatomic images for a radiologist to read and report to make a diagnosis from, and if required, provide an ordering physician a plan for treatment. So in this profession, there's a technical side but there's also what you probably would refer to as soft skills or human skills, where we work with our patients. We have to be able to communicate and be comfortable in communicating with our patients. The profession itself is a dynamic profession. It's very fast. Every day is different, and you heard it in the video, and you heard in both videos actually, where I said it and the other technologist, Jealous, said it, is that every day is different and no 2 days are the same. So our program itself trains individuals in safe use of a variety of equipment that produce X-rays and to achieve diagnostic images. So students are taught to recognize normal anatomy and pathologies on their images so that they can tell, do I need to go back and take more images, or is this sufficient to put through for the radiologist? Our instructors within our program are CMRT certified. They work closely with the students in the positioning labs to provide them with feedback. And because we can't actually take x-rays of one another, the students will position one another, and then the instructors will provide feedback and if corrections are required, how to make those corrections. So in the video, Jella mentioned several areas of radiography. And so these are, again, just different types of equipment that do produce x-rays. General radiography is probably the most common that you would have heard of or may yourself have experienced. So it's taking x-rays of bones and some soft tissues, like the chest x-ray and the abdomen. If you've fallen or hurt yourself, you may have been brought in and actually had x-rays taken. So in that case, the images are two-dimensional. They're very static. It's just like taking a snapshot and then you get to see the image. The next area would be computed tomography, CT. We're starting to see more and more of this as the equipment becomes more specialized and can produce images faster. So we're starting to see a trend towards this. And this will take like a cross section. So it's still using x-rays. It takes like a slice through the body so that if you're actually looking at the image itself, it's like standing at the foot end of somebody looking up towards their head and actually seeing inside of them. It shows organs in relationship to one another. So again, more of a soft tissue imagery versus the bony images that we would do for general radiography. Fluoroscopy is more like taking a video. And a lot of the soft tissue organs in the body aren't highlighted when we take x-rays. So what we would do in fluoroscopy is actually give somebody what's called an x-ray contrast or a dye. There's different types of contrasts, and some of them you would drink and some of them are injected, so that if we wanted to see how somebody swallows or see their stomach, we would give them a liquid to drink. It's called barium. It tastes like chalky water, not very pleasant, but they would drink this liquid and we would actually be able to watch them swallow. So it's more of a dynamic or a video. The mobile radiography, so yes, we do go everywhere pretty much. We spend a lot of time in the OR. So if you have fallen or somebody has fallen and broken a bone and the bone has to be realigned and can't just be put into a cast, they could go to the OR. We use our imaging equipment in the OR to actually realign the bones. Orthopedic surgeons put plates and screws in to make sure everything will hold and heal. In trauma, so if there's like motor vehicle accidents or say somebody has a cardiac arrest, we can take our equipment to the trauma room to actually take images there. We also do forensic imaging. So if you ever watch shows like NCIS or CSI, where they're taking x-rays in the morgue, we do that as well. Interventional procedures. So interventional procedures is a bit of a combination of fluoroscopy, and it can also be done in CT. A lot of more procedures are being done this way to actually keep from taking patients into the OR and having to have major surgery. They can actually do treatments in the interventional suites now. So shorter recovery time for the patients, and it's a lot easier for them to get mobile again afterwards. And the other one that was mentioned in the video is mammography. So mammography is using specialized equipment to image breast tissue. Next slide, please. So the program itself is an integrated program, which means that we have face-to-face theory courses, and then we actually put you out into the clinical environment to actually practice that theory. So the program itself is 2 years long, so 24 continuous months, a total of 6 terms, so 3 terms in each year. There was only breaks in between the terms. There's no term off. And usually if somebody steps away from the program, if they were to return, they would have to wait a year in order to come back. The program, we'll talk a little bit more about this when we talk about admissions, but the program has been moved from a September start to a January start. And in this January is our first intake in the new program. So in order to benefit our learners, the program alternates the theory instruction with the clinical practice. The program starts with an academic term, which consists of the face-to-face theory courses and hands-on applied labs. So classes focus on technical aspects such as the equipment and the production of our ionizing radiation and how we handle that radiation safely and keep ourselves safe, keep our patients safe, and keep the public safe. We also teach you the non-technical side of that. And again, those are the human skills. So patient care, communications, human behaviors. So that's all part of the program as well. The terms lay the groundwork for the clinical experience. So the first term is a lot of prep work and a lot of basics to get you out to clinical. And then your first clinical term is during the summertime, where you will go out and practice everything that you've been taught. So this is a three-dimensional image of a CT scan. So with the CT, we do take the cross-sectional image. It does end up looking like a two-dimensional image, but again, in cross-section. But in CT, we use the computer to reformat all of that data to create three-dimensional images. And so we thought we would show you a reconstructed skull and jaw, which is called the mandible. And this particular one has a fracture of the mandible, of the jawbone. Next image, please. So a little bit more about the clinical practicums. So I'm going to say just under half of the program is clinical. So 49 weeks of clinical experience, averaging 30 to 34 hours a week. And depending on the term, students are given either a half a day or a full day to do online courses, which are relevant in clinical. So you'll be learning the basics of, or the beginning of pathologies, and usually bony pathologies, because those are the most common for us. And so you'll be learning about those in a course, and you'll be able to see them in clinical. And actually, it's just a little bit more realistic and a little bit more relevant when you're right in clinical learning about it. We are fortunate. We have clinical instructors, and they are hospital employees that work with our students. So it's their job to create schedules for our students. They mentor our students in the environment. They review images with them. They do cases with them, and they review feedback with them as well. So they do the students' assessments as well. We also have a clinical coordinator for the program. And so the clinical coordinator is the go-between from the clinical instructors in the clinical environment and with BCIT and the instructors here at BCIT. Students throughout their clinical experience will be expected to work all shifts. And so we are a 24/7 profession. So if there's an emergency department that is open, you can bet that there's going to be a technologist on shift or working on call, waiting to be called in. And so we do expect our students to work those shifts as well, just so that they're prepared when they graduate to step in and work those shifts. The program uses 18 clinical sites throughout the Lower Mainland and in the interior through to the Kootenays. To ensure fairness to students, when we do our clinical site selections and assign seats, it's usually done with a computer program. Next slide. So just a few fun facts. As I mentioned before, we are a 24/7 profession. So there's always a technologist working in a hospital. We do actually work in both the hospital and in a private clinics. So in a private clinic setting, your hours would be more restricted than they would be in a hospital. We do both diagnostic and interventional cases. And we do work very closely with our patients. And so we do have to know patient care skills, and we are taught that. And then again, the mobile radiography. So we go to the operating room, we go to the trauma room, we go to patient wards, and we go to places like the morgue. I was actually part of a team that went to the aquarium to image the jawbone of one of the orca whales when they still used to have orcas there. So we can go everywhere. Next slide, please. So what happens once you actually graduate from the program? So, you start off as a technologist and you build your seniority in hospitals or you work in clinics. You can move on, and as you build seniority, you can become a shift supervisor or a site supervisor or a manager of a department. I was actually a clinical instructor at the hospital, so I was fortunate enough to work with the students in that environment. A lot of our graduates come back and work at BCIT as instructors. Some of our graduates from several years ago, many years ago, are actually imaging directors. So they actually are higher level executive directors of the imaging hospitals. So it's quite a nice progression. And then we have some graduates that move on and start working for the manufacturers like GE and Siemens and sell the equipment that we actually use in the programs and in the hospital. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go on to some information regarding admissions. And so, just a few points about what makes a strong applicant. So if you have a strong academic history, the programs themselves are quite intense. So, having good study skills and being strong academically is good. Relevant volunteer or work experience. And so relevant is not just in healthcare, but it's working with the public, working with other people, communication skills, those type of things, and knowledge of the profession. So, you would be expected to have some understanding of what we do in the as an MRT. When we say we go to the OR and we go to the trauma room, are you comfortable with those type of cases that we would be doing? Next slide, please. So our programs now start in January. We take one intake of 80 students once a year. The next intake, there's an intake starting this coming January, so January 2022, and there still are some seats available for that. And then the next intake would be January 2023. So qualities to be successful in the program and profession. So we've talked about this a little bit. So strong communication skills, an ability to work independently and in a team. So, depending on what shift you're on or how difficult your patient is, sometimes you will be able to go in and do the case on your own. But for a patient that maybe requires a little bit more help, then we need to be able to work with our peers or with other healthcare team members, like whether it's a respiratory therapist or if it's one of the nurses. So we have to be able to work with other healthcare team members as well. excellent physical and mental health, and time stress management skills. So over the years, the equipment has definitely gotten better. And if anybody has ever driven a car that doesn't have power steering, that's what the equipment used to be like. You had to be very strong in order to move the equipment. It's definitely much better now, but it still is heavy equipment to be moved. Our patients sometimes need us to help them into certain positions, even just sliding a patient up a bed or up a stretcher in order to be able to get our imaging plate behind them. So you have to be fairly physically fit. And the job itself can, just like any healthcare job would be these days, it can be quite stressful. So you need to be able to manage your stress levels. Strong decision-making and problem-solving skills. And so when you're working on a case and your patient can't move into the position that you need them to move into, how do you actually get the x-ray then? So you have to be able to solve these problems. And then computer literacy, 3D visualization, manual dexterity, eye-hand coordination skills. And so you could see from some of the equipment that were in the video and in some of the pictures that we've shown, our profession is technical, very technical, and we do a lot of work on computers. So that is definitely an asset. Next slide, please. The application process itself. So please make sure that you go to the website to review the requirements and the application process dates. You don't want to miss out because you've missed a deadline. Sometimes you will be required to upgrade, and there's many advisors available that can help you with that information. Collecting all of your documents. So make sure that you have your transcripts and any other documents that are required. Make sure those are all PDF'd and that you can upload them in with your application. There is a mandatory application questionnaire. So please make sure that you're answering those questions honestly. Complete the CASPER entrance tests. And so CASPER is video testing that has to be done as part of the application. And so if you do have any questions about CASPER itself, you should be contacting them. Again, the information to contact them is on the website. And then apply online prior to the deadlines. So once you've applied, we would go through all the applications, and we would go through and shortlist the applicants and send that information through and make a final selection. And then you would hear from BCIT as to whether or not you've been accepted or not. There is a 4 to 6 weeks. And sorry, this process can take an average of 4 to 6 weeks after the deadline has closed. Next slide, please. Laddering opportunities for our graduates. So once you've actually graduated from the program and are a technologist, there's other avenues that you can go down. Magnetic resonant imaging, so MRI. There's actually quite a shortage right now. So many of our grads move on to do an MRI certificate. It's a series of online courses, so you can actually take the courses while you're working as an MRT. And then there's a certification exam at the end that has to be taken. The MRI certificate is actually also part of the Bachelor of Health Sciences degree. So if you wanted to continue on with your studies after you get your certificate, you can also get a bachelor's, and this is at BCIT. There's a Bachelor of Health Science degree through TRU, and again, these are all online. Health Science Leadership Advanced Certificate also offered through BCIT, and so if you were interested in getting into healthcare management, this might be something that you would be interested in. And Bachelor of Technology in Technology Management at BCIT as well. So there's a lot of opportunities. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Julie.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, looking at the camera, all you can see is the top of my head. Okay, let me pull up my notes because I don't have this memorized. Okay, so From the service areas, which are listed here, there's a few important ones that I wanted to mention. One of them being the Counseling and Student Development Department, which is available to enhance your educational performance and maximize success as a student here. They offer virtual and phone in-person appointments. Please take a look at the website and you can find out more about that. If you are of an Indigenous background, BCIT Indigenous Initiatives is here for you to ensure a smooth transition into your first year. They offer peer-to-peer mentorship, a welcoming gathering place, and provide clarification on Indigenous funding options. BCIT Student Health Services is a health clinic located on the Burnaby campus. They provide medical care for current BCIT students year-round. Currently, in addition to their phone and virtual appointments, you can go in person. I encourage you to also review BCIT's awards, scholarships, and bursaries that are listed on our financial aid and awards webpage. There is a President's Entrance Award for which selection is based on academic achievement and volunteer and community service. Additional details will be listed on the webpage. And last and not least is our Rec Services Department. So there we have a fully functioning gym. We have open table tennis courts, basketball court. There is a sauna, a steam room. There is a multitude of services, a rock climbing wall available. So I definitely encourage, if you do come to BCIT, that you take advantage of the services that are offered and applicable to you. Our next slide here is our program advising information. So with this one, if you have questions about applying or anything about the program, we encourage you to call or go drop in. There's virtual drop-ins, there's on-campus drop-ins, you can email. Don't worry about copying down the information on this slide. Everyone here today and everyone that's registered for this event will receive the slide deck and the recording in their email in the next few days. Okay, and lucky for us, we have Jessie Taylor here, who is an actual program advisor who will be available to answer questions in just a couple of minutes. If you are wanting to connect with us on social media, we have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And then there's just a series of links with more information about some of the ways that you can get to know the programs. Now it's time for our question and answer period. So feel free to, I think Jessie was already answering questions in the chat. Okay, here, Jessie, I'll just pass it right over to you.
Julie. So certainly feel free to pipe in, pop a quick question in the chat, or you could raise your hand and we'll try and get you to verbalize your question, or just let us know that you want to ask a question out loud in the chat is another option. Hopefully you guys have seen some of the messages I popped into the chat throughout the session, just encouraging you to make sure that you've reviewed the full set of information on the program page. Take a look at the details and the links that are on there, because it's a lot of important information, including things like tuition, which isn't outlined on the page, but you eventually get directed to a PDF to see those details in detail. And then as well, feel free to reach out to us after the session tonight, directly in the program advising department. And you could just search program advising on the website to pull up our page. I could see at least one attendee from the previous session checking out a couple of programs. That's great. So Nat's asking about housing options specific to practicum. So I'm assuming you're referring to where you might be doing a practicum outside of the Lower Mainland, perhaps, or outside of your regular area that you're living. I do know that there's external housing options that are listed within our housing department. So on their website, they have some links. I believe it's primarily for the Lower Mainland. So it might be a matter of trying to connect with someone within the department to see if they're aware of specific connections that previous students have used, be it Airbnb, a specific hotel or motel that might be more affordable. I see Denise wants to chime in, I think. So.
Yes, so for students that are sent to clinical sites outside of the Lower Mainland, we do work with our clinical partners to see if there are people in the area that are willing to let rooms, because the clinical practicums are, like, the longest one is 20 weeks long, and then the shortest is 13 weeks long. So you wouldn't necessarily want, if you're, renting in the Lower Mainland, give up your place and take all your belongings, out of town only for a short period of time. So we work with our clinical partners. There's a lot of technologists and people that work in the hospital that have rooms for rent. So basically you can rent a furnished space without having to move all of your stuff with you. And so we provide that once we know, or to the students that are actually going to those sites, we would provide that information. And we would also work with the clinical instructor if because some places housing is difficult and more difficult than others. And so we work with our clinical instructors on those sites to find students accommodations.
There's a follow-up question from Shane asking about when working at 2 different clinical sites. Curious about where in the Kootenays these sites might be located, and are they all over the Kootenays?
So right now we have 2 sites in the Kootenays, and they've been fairly consistent for us, Trail and Cranbrook. The other sites are in the interior, so Penticton, Kamloops, Kelowna, and Vernon would be the interior sites. And then all the other sites are in the Lower Mainland, excuse me, from VGH out to Abbotsford, so right across the Lower Mainland. We don't do any clinical placements on the island or in the north.
Just trying to type a response to Supreet asking about transitioning from business management to this program, not presently having any volunteer experience. So I was just trying to comment that certainly having some post-secondary education with hopefully a consistent or solid performance within the academics could be helpful. I do believe the department still would expect that you obtain some volunteer experience as they've outlined on the program page.
Yes. And I'm just going to chime in here. We do that so that students and applicants know, like, get a sense of the sights and the smells of the clients that you're going to be interacting with and the environments that you're going to be in. It's unfortunate if somebody comes into the program, doesn't quite understand the environments that we're going to be in. We do deal with body fluid. We do deal with some very scary sights. And so, I had one student that made it into the program, and you then realize that we actually do IV insertions, and that was one thing that she couldn't handle. So we want you as applicants and new students into the program to realize what it is that you're getting yourself into. So that's why they ask the clinical experience. Now with COVID, things are a little bit more difficult, and so we will be more flexible about it. But yeah.
There are some pages specific to volunteering that do outline particular volunteering opportunities during COVID-19. So I'd encourage you, I believe it's govolunteerbc.ca, maybe the website that outlines some specific options. Or even in your spare time to be able to connect with someone that's elderly or requires additional assistance. It could be a matter of just having a conversation with them, and then in an appropriate setting, be it outdoor or through a window or somewhere where you're spaced out, or perhaps fetching them groceries or other things that you can do that allow you to provide support in the community. So, and Harleen, I was just typing in a response to your question. Specific to use of a post-secondary credited course for physics to prove the Physics 12 requirement, there are some details that you can find within the equivalencies area that the admissions department has outlined. On the program page, if you scroll down beyond the entrance requirements, there's a read more about how to meet BCIT's entrance requirements on the page. And within there's the equivalency section specific to post-secondary. So as long as you have a valid grade within your physics credited course, that should be valid from the admissions department point of view to prove the Physics 12. And you'll see other details that will be outlined that offer more specifics if it were for biology or anatomy and physiology, as well as mathematics. There's a few additional details there, but physics and chemistry from the post-secondary system tend to be accepted in general, no matter what, as long as you have a valid grade and it's at least a 3-credit course. So I've got Basma asking on the website, it says BCIT invites 160 students, 2 to 1 students to participate in the selection process. Can you elaborate on what this means? So Denise, I don't know. Essentially, obviously, the program has a tendency or has historically received twice as many applications as they have space in the program. So it's roughly an 80 seat capacity, unless that's changed from last I checked. And so they would then go through the process of reviewing all the aspects of those applicants to make a determination on who might be shortlisted to proceed on to the next step within the selection process.
Yes, and we did drop our cohort size down for 1 year from 80 to 64, and now we're back up to 80. I'm sure it's not just a nursing shortage; it's a shortage across health care and healthcare professionals right across the board. And so we've now brought our numbers back up to 80s to hopefully help with this shortage. And so, and usually we do receive quite a few applications, and it is usually a 2 to 1, so 160 applications for the 80 seats that we do offer. The more current and the more up to date your requirements are, then I mean that usually makes you a better candidate.
More advantageous as per the competitive preferences outlined on the program page, right?
Yes. So I see Catherine's question. So a schedule for a typical schedule for a MedRad student. So usually Mondays are lecture days for us. And so it's 7 hours of lecture, usually 3 or 4 hours in the morning. You get an hour for lunch and then another 3 hours in the afternoon. And then the rest of the week, it tends to be spent in labs, whether you're practicing your positioning that you're learning the theory for in the lectures on the Mondays, or if you're doing image analysis. So, you know, okay, here's the x-rays. Now we're going to teach you what is a good x-ray and how can you tell, the corrections that need to be made. Is this a good image? Should it be repeated? So then there's labs throughout the week, and then patient care labs. So we teach you what you would consider, I guess, would be the human skills, the patient care, the nursing skills. There's labs for that as well. So almost every theory course we have has an applied lab component to it, and that's what you would spend the rest of the week doing. The days tend to be quite long. We start at 8:30 and go as late as 5:30.
Thanks, Denise. Great question, Catherine. I was going to comment, myself from as a BCIT graduate from the School of Business, you are definitely committing yourself fully to BCIT during this time. So make sure that you're not trying to work even 1 day a week. I would say for most programs, just the course load and the work that you're doing outside the classroom could be fairly significant as well as hopefully you have support systems in place. People that are going to be able to help you do your laundry where you don't have time to do that, or make you a meal, and then continue to focus on your studies at BCIT. Any other questions from anyone? I haven't seen any hands raised. And so Catherine was asking whether the studies would be delivered mostly online. And so this,
I was just going to say, so the hope is that January things will be more normal than they are now, because really the program is meant to be delivered face-to-face. So the theory is face-to-face, and all of our labs, even, from last fall, so fall of 2020, all of our positioning labs were face-to-face. So even though most of our theory was online, the labs were face-to-face, hands-on. Our profession is very tactile, so you have to be able to feel the bony structures to know, I need to have from here to here. How do I make sure that those structures are on? So the labs are face-to-face no matter what. And then we're hoping to return to our normal, which would be face-to-face lecture and face-to-face labs. We do have online courses in the program, but that's usually when you're out in the clinical environment. Those are the only online courses we have.
And that's where you'll find the indication on the overview section of the program page, currently indicating blended, obviously, and that's showing the indication of that combination of in-class as well as online or distance delivered.
We do have a couple more minutes left. There is a question about how many graduates are hired full-time versus casual upon graduating. And then we have one last question after that.
I don't actually know percentages. What I can say is that during normal times, the trend would be more to be hired as casual and then work your way up through the more hours you get, the more seniority you build. And so you would be in a seniority list towards getting a permanent job or a permanent or part-time job. But usually the start would be as a casual. Right now, there are jobs posted that they can't fill. And so any graduates that came along this year pretty much walked into, even if it was temporary full-time or temporary part-time. And again, the jobs haven't been filled. So.
Good question, Kat. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I haven't missed any other questions here. So question from ZE, would using a university course to fulfill the prerequisite be more competitive than high school courses? From my point of view, I would say because applicants are being reviewed overall, you could have someone that's come out of high school, has great volunteer experience, maybe they've got some work experience that's valid, have really strong grades from high school, and then you can have a more average university student with less strong grades and maybe less experience in volunteering or otherwise work experience, and perhaps they may be sitting at par, or the high school student may be preferred in that scenario. So it's not about one aspect necessarily, it's about the well-rounded applicant. Just wondering, I guess, so Shane's asking, he's 33, looking at changing careers. Is there a wide range of ages and backgrounds of students being accepted in this program as long as they're qualified? So.
Absolutely. And Jesse, just as you mentioned, even if you're a little bit more mature, again, you've now had more experiences, and that really helps you in the career itself. And yeah, part of the application process as well. But the more experiences you have, the more things you have to pull from when it comes to making, critical decisions, right? So it's definitely, we do accept a wide range of ages. I graduated from the program many years ago, but I was 28 and I came in with a BSc in kinesiology. So I didn't come out of high school, and I worked retail before that. So, and I had no healthcare background before coming in. So yeah, we accept all ages and all backgrounds.
And I had one that I wanted to make sure I didn't miss here from Nima. So I don't know, Denise, you may have already addressed the first part of the question, but asking about average salary after graduation, and in general, whether there's demand for MRTs in the Lower Mainland specifically.
Definitely there is. and as I said, right now there's jobs that aren't being filled just because they just don't have the workforce to fill them. And sorry, what was the other part of the question?
Average salary after graduation.
Yeah, so average salary after graduation, anywhere from $31 an hour to $38 an hour, and that's starting. The longer you work, the more you make. And if you do shift work, like a midnight shift has more, you get a different rate based on that. If you're a shift supervisor, you get more again per hour. It's a pay scale. Their union is the HSA, so the Health Sciences Association. And there's a wage scale that you can look up online. But it's anywhere from $31 to $38 an hour to start.
Yeah, and I just punched in, there's a link on the program page that is specific to surveyed graduates from the program. And that could be helpful for reference. It's something that not everyone is always aware that that link is specific to. So it's a good idea to take a look at that. And Z is asking about how often would an MRT work night shifts? Is it usually required to do night shifts? Is that a regular thing?
Yeah, so in the hospital, definitely. And you, as an entry technologist, you'd probably be working quite a few of them. And I have to, again, go back to my own experience. Once I graduated, again, I was working casual at several hospitals. And then the first temporary maternity leave that came up that I took was a midnight on the weekends. And so that tends to be the shifts that are available when you first start out, but usually the longer you work, the fewer you have to work. And then there's, some technologists out there that they prefer to work the midnight shifts. And so then you're fortunate because those shifts go to those people. But, as an entry technologist, I would expect that you would be working quite a few. If you're working in the clinical environment, in the clinics, they tend not to be open at night. So their patient volume is probably high, but the patient acuity is lower. So most of those patients would walk in and you would not be working nights in that environment.
I just typed in a closing statement, just saying thank you to everyone. It's a great set of questions that everyone's come up with. And hopefully we've, through this information session, we provided you details that you may have been unaware of and helped to clarify certain things. And encourage you to consider applying to the medical radiography program. So appreciate that. Unless there's any other last minute questions, we could probably wrap up the session and everyone have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.